Yes, hello. Good evening, everybody. Good evening and welcome. A pleasure to have everyone here. I'm Rabbi Dan Horowitz. I'm the CEO of the Jewish Federation of Greater Nashville. A pleasure to welcome everyone here this evening. Special as well to be hosted by the JCC. My counterpart and colleague friend, Jesse Feld, who just started a couple weeks ago, is just outside the door. He didn't get a name tag. He didn't make the cut. No, Jesse's here. Thank you to the J for hosting us. It's my pleasure this evening. I'm going to introduce Chancellor Diermeier, who's welcome to come and sit so he can get some steps in. And the vision for this evening is really to kind of have the opportunity to have a fireside chat, if you will. We are live streaming simultaneously so that everybody can listen to this by the radios like they used to 50 years ago, with a lovely group that are here in person as well.
It's not on TV. It's on the radio?
Well, it's on YouTube, so I guess it depends if you have a YouTube TV app or
YouTube
not on your smart TV.
Good.
Yeah, it's good.
That's great. I'm glad I wore a suit. That's very good.
Exactly.
Yes,
We are visible to people.
Okay,
So Chancellor Diermeier is a political scientist who is now serving as the 9th Chancellor of Vanderbilt University. He began his tenure in 2020. Previously, he was the David Lee Schilling Law Distinguished Service Professor at the University of Chicago, where he was also the provost. Born in West Berlin, he experienced firsthand the fall of the Berlin Wall. He was the first in his family to go to college and now holds a PhD in political science from the University of Rochester, master's degrees from the University of Munich, the University of Southern California, and also the University of Rochester. I also have 3 master's degrees. Respect. I like that. Chancellor Diermeier has published 4 books and more than 100 research articles in academic journals. And only a few years into his tenure at Vanderbilt, we recently learned his contract was extended through 2035. So we wish you a mazel tov. And we have lots of questions for you this evening. Some will be softballs, some will be harder balls, but most of all, the general premise that we wanted to hear about tonight is we know that campus has been a tumultuous place, not only in recent years with COVID, but obviously since October 7th as well. And we're seeing campuses explode all across the country, if I can frame it that way. And one of the core principles that Chancellor Diermeier has written about and is a strong proponent of comes out of the University of Chicago School of Thought and what's known as principled neutrality. And this is a term that I think some of us have maybe heard, and if not, we're going to learn about it tonight. What is the basis for this theory? How does it work from your perspective? All of those kinds of good things. But first, I think I just want to start with a little bit just a background on you to get to know you a little better for everybody here before we dive like right to the meat and potatoes. It's the South. We have to be hospitable. We call this a Vorspeise in Yiddish, right? So tell me a little bit a little bit of not only about like your education, if you want to fill in a little more meat on the bones of what I just laid out, but specifically what drew you to Vanderbilt? Yeah. What have your main priorities been, and what have you been excited to find, and what do you perceive as opportunities and challenges?
Okay, that's a lot. So, I'll try to be succinct. First of all, thank you so much for having me today, and I want to thank. I don't know where Deborah is. Like, I want to thank her too for putting this all together, and she's keeping us safe. She's outside, very good. And you know, Rabbi Shlomo, we've been talking about this, and then I think Ari is not here today. You know, from Vanderbilt Hillel, but we've had lots of conversation on that as well. Oh, very good. Shannon is here. Very good. So great to be here tonight. Really looking forward to the conversation. So a little background on me. As you mentioned, I was born in Berlin, in the western part of the city. I spent also the second part of my upbringing, my childhood, was spent in Munich. So I had both Berlin and Munich. I would say that growing up in a divided city had a profound impact on me, and I have very strong memories about like what it's like to live right next to the wall, the border, the tension, the conflict, this Jean le Carré type kind of wall between the West and the East, and the Warsaw Pact and NATO. So this left a profound, I think, impression on me already as a child, and then of course I spent a lot of time going back. Most of my family was still in Berlin, so I had this. There was a strong, I think, had a strong impact on me, as I mentioned. And then, of course, when the wall came down, which I think was like one of the great, moments, and certainly in recent history, that experience was also profound in many different ways. So I came to the United States on a fellowship. I was a first-generation student, as was pointed out. So the German government had a fellowship for me that allowed me to go to university. And part of that was to go to the United States. So I was at 23, I arrived at an LAX airport with 2 suitcases and $1,000. And never been in the United States, never been to an English-speaking country. And through some complicated maneuvering, was able to talk my way into a PhD program in philosophy at University of Southern California, which had been my dream my entire life. I wanted to be a philosophy professor since I was 15, 16. And so everything was great, and I was on my path, and half a year in the program, I decided philosophy is not for me. So I left, I went back to Germany, then the wall came down, so I was there for a year, and then I got my PhD at the University of Rochester in a field called kind of political science, but it's like game theory, like mathematics of conflict, of cooperation. And then taught at Stanford, at Northwestern, in the business schools. And then, as you pointed out, was at the University of Chicago, was the dean of policy and then the provost. Again, formative years for me. So I started my tenure at Vanderbilt July 1, 2020. Timing is everything in life, so this was perfectly timed. I wanted to be at a university where there was a real possibility for hopefully positive impact. And I felt that the fundamentals, if you will, that Vanderbilt had and the city of Nashville had were just phenomenal on that. So I didn't want to be at a place where, they put on your tombstone, he didn't sink the ship. That was not my goal. I want to be a place where I could really feel potential and a willingness and I think a mindset that the best days are ahead of the university. I had phenomenal interaction with the board. I love my board, and they were kind enough to extend my contract, so that was nice to hear. But it was something from the very beginning where I felt there was energy, there was potential, there was possibility. I loved the culture, the people of Nashville. It was somewhat limited during COVID, of course, but there was some possibility. I loved the friendliness, I loved the openness, and I loved the wealth of creative talent. I always tell people that this is one of the most wonderful things about the city. It's, of course, music plays such an important role, but it sets the tone. And it sets the tone for what I think Nashville is all about, whether you build a business or you go to the university or you try to make your way in music or you open a restaurant or a cafe. It's, to me, the central metaphor. Cities have kind of metaphors or like stories that they tell, but to me, the central metaphor of Nashville is the band. And it's not the star, that's LA, right? It's the band where people from different backgrounds that bring different things, that play different instruments, have different talents, come together and create something that they couldn't do on their own. So it's a creative place, but it's also a deeply collaborative, community-oriented space. So I have been extremely happy. In my 4 years at Vanderbilt, we've made great progress. We have done many, many ambitious things. But we've done it, I think, in a spirit of what's our North Star, what are the core values of the university, how do we always make sure that the decisions that we make are driven by a sense of purpose and grounded in a common understanding who we are as a university. And that has been a wonderful almost 4 years now, and I'm looking forward to many more years here at Vanderbilt and in Nashville.
Awesome. Thank you. Let's dive right into.
So that was the softball?
That was the softball.
Okay, good. Okay, good. All right, good.
Let's dive right into to this concept of principled neutrality.
Yep.
Can you? I feel like I'm at the spelling bee. Can you please define your term?
Yes.
Define
Yes.
the term for us and let us know.
And use it in a sentence or something. Yes. Okay.
The language of origin and
okay, good.
And
okay.
how it unfolds from your perspective.
Absolutely. So it goes back to what I just said, is that everything we try to do is grounded in a sense of purpose. what we're all about as a university. And for Vanderbilt, that means is that our purpose is really to create the environment for transformative education and path-breaking research. I mean, we are, one of the leading research universities in the country. This is a very selective place to go to college, and that's the way we think about our purpose. Now, then you have to ask yourself, well, what are the principles or values that would enable that? And to pursue path-breaking research or to have a transformative education, it's important that you can follow ideas where they take you, even if they go against conventional wisdom. So there needs to be a maximal freedom to explore ideas and concepts. That's really fundamentally what we're trying to accomplish. And then there are values, or we call them pillars, that are there to support that. The first one is what we call it open forum. That is a traditional commitment to free speech and free discourse, that we want to create an environment where students and faculty can broadly explore ideas. We also want to have speakers on campus. We want to have an environment where people can present their ideas, where they can be criticized, where they can be debated. But we're not going to have where speakers are shut down or canceled. That's open forum. The second one is what we call principal neutrality. Some other universities call it institutional neutrality. Either way, it's the same thing. I like principled better because it I think it reminds us of why we're doing it, and that this is a position, a pillar that's grounded in an intentional sense of what we should do and what should guide us. So principal neutrality is in some sense the opposite of open forum. So open forum is about providing an environment to speak, and that's a responsibility for the university, a room where ideas can be explored. Institutional or principal neutrality is about what the university's position should be. And the core belief of institutional or principal neutrality is that if the university doesn't have a duty to speak on something, it should remain silent. So what does it mean in practice? It means that on issues that are not core to the functioning of the university will not take positions. Will not take positions. Why? Because we want to create the broadest possible environment for our students to explore things on their own and for faculty to engage the research that they're doing. So that there's no party line, but people are not be worried about a party line. And I'll tell you in a moment about how this becomes practical. Okay? Before Dan is going to throw the next question at me. So I'm like, and then the third one, which is kind of like a Vanderbilt special, is we have a commitment to civil discourse, which means that we treat each other with respect. We use arguments and reasons. We want to be fact-based in our discussions. And we never want to forget that we're members of one community dedicated to the same purpose and grounded in the same values. So when our students show up on campus, they sign, which we call a community creed, that re-emphasizes those values, especially the sense of civil discourse. So now you're going to ask me about how this becomes practical. I'm just going to give you one example. Okay, so institutional principal neutrality, how does this work in practice? So BDS. Okay, so we get we of course got calls like every other university to boycott businesses that have any connection with Israel, or divest our endowment, cut any kind of relationships or connections with businesses in Israel through the use of our endowment. So divest from anybody that has a connection. And these calls came up in December already. And now whenever we have that, right, we can go back to our values and can ask ourselves, well, what does our values teach us about that? Well, institutional neutrality tells us that any calls for boycott, divestment, or sanction is inconsistent with institutional neutrality. We're not gonna do that. We're not gonna boycott or divest from Israel, like we wouldn't divest from other countries. And so, we were very clear about that. In my welcome back message in January, I said, we're not going to engage with that because it's inconsistent with our values. Now, it also turns out that it's illegal under Tennessee law, which is a whole nother conversation to have. But the core thing for us was we're not doing it because it's inconsistent with our values. And this commitment not to use the endowment for political purposes goes pretty deep. So it's not the first time we have resisted pressures to divest. When I was at the University of Chicago, they have also this principle, they call it something else a little bit, but open forum and principle neutrality, those are cherished values there. And by the way, we are 3 or 4 universities that have this commitment to institutional neutrality. Most other universities will take positions on political issues without any problem. Now, last week, Harvard came along. Okay, they didn't call it institutional neutrality. They had to come up with some other name. That's fine, it's the same thing. And we wish they had gone a little bit further than that, but boy, do we love the movement. Okay, so, and we've seen a variety of other universities exploring this now as well to their faculty committee. So that was a slightly longer answer than you wanted, but I wanted to put the different principles together in context.
No, it's good. Thank you. Thank you. So the core 3 values I heard you express as part of principled neutrality are open forum, the principled or institutional neutrality itself that don't get involved unless you have to get involved, right? And then civil discourse.
Yep.
And those were kind of the big 3. Where do lines get drawn in free expression versus hate speech in your estimation in that equation? So, you know, many of us saw academic leaders sitting in front of Congress, and even if legally they were right in saying it depends on the circumstances, there was a failure there from many folks' perspective to be like, calling for Jews to die is bad. So how do you think about free expression, and where does it cross lines into hate speech that makes it beyond the pale in terms of what should be accepted within the realm of civil discourse?
So what was odd to me about the hearings, December hearings, was there, you know, it's like, I mean, there were many questions about how the president responded to that, but there's a pretty simple thing where in this particular case that you know, the examples that you pointed out, we are, you know, we're an educational institution. As an educational institution, we are subject to a whole variety of regulations. One of them is, you know, called, there's Title IX, which has to do with like very often comes up in cases of sexual harassment or sexual misconduct. And there's Title VI, which is about making sure that we have an environment free of harassment where our students can learn properly. So if we have people calling for the death of whatever group you want to think about, well, that's a violation of Title VI as we see it. So it's a pretty straightforward question mark to us at this point. If we have an environment where people are harassed or threatened or intimidated so that they can no longer participate actively in an education as is our responsibility, that's clearly where we would draw. That's a clear line. Now, you know, I'm sure like half of how many people are like have a JD or went to law school? 5, 6, 7. I know some more. I know you. You work for me. Okay, so there you go. All right. So I didn't see your hand going up there, Diana. Okay, it was way up. Okay, good. Very good. Okay, that's good. All right. So, you know, and then of course that's what lawyers do. You know, you have a principle and you figure out, is it here, is it there, and so forth. But the requirement for us to have an environment, a learning environment that's free of threats and harassment, that's a requirement we all have to live by, and that would guide our decision making in those settings.
Thank you. I want to share with you a quote that comes from a friend of mine who's on the Board of Regents of the University of Michigan, whose law offices were vandalized just a couple of weeks ago. He specifically actually calls for Michigan to adopt a position of institutional neutrality, like the University of Chicago. We got to go a little further till he starts referencing Vanderbilt instead of Chicago, right?
It's okay.
But specifically, he raises a concern, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts about the classroom.
Yes.
One of the things that he's most concerned about is professors who are looking for specific opinions to be held by their students in order to warrant grades that merit what the professor likes and align. How within this neutrality construct do you think about faculty? I know some are here, but how do you think about faculty, their role, their limits of what they could, would, should be able to express, and what sort of silencing effect there may be on students in their classes, depending on what positions the faculty may stake out publicly?
Okay, so let me give a little context, and then I come back, I zoom in into your question. So the fundamental purpose of institutional neutrality or principal neutrality was stated in what's known as the Calvin Report, which is a document that was written in 1967 at the University of Chicago. That's hence the reference to Chicago. And what the Calvin Report very clearly states is that to say the reason why you want to have a position of neutrality on political issues is because otherwise you create a chilling effect where people are worried that they are running foul against the party line. That's the fundamental idea. Now, what we have, faculty and students can take positions, okay? So we're fine with faculty and particular students that they take positions. It's not about suppressing where individual members of the community are, but it's about the role of the institution. It's a requirement, it binds the institution. Now by institution, I mean the university, but also individual schools or departments, for example. Anything that could, by taking an official position, kind of repress individual opinions and debate. That's the idea. There's also, by the way, a practical reason to that, which to me is very important, and which I wrote about. So one challenge is, of course, once you take one position, now the question is, what about the next issue, right? And many of you may have heard Larry Summers, the former president of Harvard, in a tweet, I think it was a tweet, on October 8th, basically said, I'm paraphrasing, but I think it's a fair summary. He said, look, you had the Ukrainian flag flying over Harvard Yard. Where's the Israeli flag today? There was this. And now as a president, you have to well, why not, or why, or what's the thing? And you have to do it under tremendous time pressure, with a lot of emotions going very high. And by the way, you're also, by doing this all the time, by taking a position on this or that or the other, you're encouraging your campus to become more politicized. Because now there's value in constantly pressuring the university to take a position on this or the other. So those are some of the justification for institutional neutrality. Now, a professor that utilizes his classroom to give favors to students or assign grades based on their political position is violating his responsibility as a teacher, full stop, okay? So that I think is kind of orthogonal to institutional neutrality. It's just like what you're supposed to be doing, okay, as a teacher, as an educator. And if we have cases where, faculty are utilizing the classroom for political indoctrination, again, if you're not saying it according to my political view, you're having a C rather than an A, then they have to see the dean, okay? Or and then the dean would have a conversation and say, this is not possible, you can't do that. So that to me is, if we're deviating from the purpose of being a professor, and this becomes the classroom becomes like a place of indoctrination, we kind of took the wrong term a while ago. So that's on the classroom side, and that's just like I'm not saying that never happens, but it's clearly not anything that we would condone, and it's clearly not anything that we see as consistent with the role of a faculty member. Now, where things get interesting, of course, is when they're great professors and they take positions outside of classroom. Okay, now we are pretty lenient on that. I mean, our sense is that, you know, and by the way, we want our faculty to be engaged in policy debates. We encourage that. They do it all the time. I mean, during COVID, for example, right? I mean, we had like, one of our faculty members was kind of the health czar of Nashville, right? We like that. We like that our faculty are engaged in education policy, in health policy, in energy policy. We're having all these partnerships with the city of Nashville where our faculty are playing an important role of that. That's okay. They have to, but they have to be ready that people push back and do not agree with them, and they cannot use the position that they take on a particular, policy side and indoctrinate in the classroom. That would not be okay.
Thank you. I'd be curious to hear your take on the folks who aren't interested in paying room and board at their universities because they can just pitch a tent these days. What's your take on the encampments that have been sprouting up around the country? At some campuses, it seems that there's been a willingness to negotiate with these folks, even if they're breaking rules. Curious how someone in your position views what's on. And we had encampment locally as well,
Good.
Obviously. So
when are the softball questions coming back
yeah, right,
again?
Exactly.
Okay. I think.
I'm very curious to hear your take on what's happening.
Very good question. So maybe I'll go back a little bit and just tell you a little what happened at Vanderbilt. Many of you will know this, but just so that you have the whole so that you can understand the proper context. So the first and most important thing that I should say, that the vast majority of our students for many, many months have been awesome. Okay, so we had, in the week after October 7th, we had vigils, we had, there were prayers, there were walk of meditation, there were lots of discussions inside the classroom, outside the classroom, and people were practicing the values that they all had signed up to. That doesn't mean that everybody agreed, that doesn't mean that we didn't have passionate discussions, but I was extremely proud of our students. We then had, on March 26, an incident which was targeted towards Kirkland Hall. Kirkland Hall is where my office is. It's like it's the building with the one tower. And Kirkland Hall had been totally renovated. It was a gut-level renovation. There was all sorts of things that had to be fixed. And there was still some minor construction work that needed to be done, some electric work, some painting and stuff like that. So the building was closed, but there were people working in there, including myself and some of my staff. So in the morning of that day, a group of students, 27 of them, pretended that they had a meeting inside, and then as one of our security officers opened the doors, they kind of bull rushed the door, ran over the security officer. The security officer was pushed into a door frame, got injured. He was actually off duty for 2 weeks. Then they ran upstairs, and then they tried to get into my office. My staff that were there, they were able to prevent them. They tried to push in, but they were able to close the doors. And then the students sat outside of my office. And that was around 9 o'clock, 9:10, 9:15. We then, after discussions with Metro, we arrested 3 of the students that had pushed the security officer and pushed others, and they were charged with assault. By the city, their bonds were placed, and there's that process is going on. We had also told all the students previously that they would be subject to student discipline. There's a standard student discipline process. They were reminded of that repeatedly. So at 5 a.m. we arrested the 3 students, and everybody else then left and went back. And there was student discipline at that, so there was called what we call an interim suspension. Then the process started the week after. It takes 2 to 3 weeks. We had a couple of students expelled, a couple of students, then there were some suspensions, and there were probation. And probation that's not just a slap on the wrist, that means you lose certain rights while you're on probation, like running for offices and stuff like that. So that's what we did. I would say the response to that by both our community, broadly speaking, the national community, our alums and our parents, and most of our students and most of our faculty was very positive. I mean, really, really strong. I then wrote a piece in the Wall Street Journal, some of you may have seen that, where I kind of laid out what we did and why we did it, and there was very much an emphasis on values and the need to enforce them. You know, you have set your values and then you have to live by them. So that was super positive, well received. It's probably the most positive response I've had in my career. I mean, it was like hundreds of emails, sometimes people I haven't heard from for 20 years, people I've never heard of, obviously, but it was very strong. Some faculty didn't like it. I think there was a group of faculty that was, wrote me a letter and said, I think some sympathized with the original demands of the students, which was over, BDS activity, and we can go into the details of exactly what they were asking for and so forth. And some felt that the consequences were too harsh, that the disciplinary outcomes were too severe. So that's the context. We then had a few students setting up tents in front of I think we were the first encampment in the country. So it was before Columbia and all of that. It was nicer, the weather was nicer, and it was, maybe 10 tents, maybe like 15 students, something like that. So we don't have a clear policy on that. Okay, we may ask, well, why not? Well, we just didn't have it. We're now looking at it in more detail, exactly how it would work. So we talked to the students and we told the students and we said, as long as you behave properly, that's fine. So they were there and there was no issue whatsoever. They were taking turns being in the tents. They had like a teach-in. And then, 10 days before commencement, we had a conversation with the students. And we said, now we're like, everybody's leaving campus, and this needs to come to an end now. We also need the space for some commencement activities, and that was it. They packed up. So that was our story. Now, a far cry from, and I should say that since this incident at Kirkland, we have really had no problems. We had a commencement, which was fantastic. I mean, so important to have that. This was the class of 24 that didn't have a high school graduation. So our team worked overtime to make this possible. It was very meaningful. It was very emotional. We did it at Geodis Park. It was a great event. We've had the week when this incident happened, we had the Israeli ambassador and the former prime minister of the Palestinian Authority on campus, in a class with 100 students. Great discussions, great questions, unforgettable educational experience for the students. And then we had, and I think some of you participated in that, we had, the first night of Passover, we had a celebration on the main lawn, alumni lawn, with 800 members of our community. So that's all afterwards. Okay, so I think there is I look at this as an isolated incident, hopefully, but the community overall has been in great shape. Has really, things have been done really well, have gone really well since then. Doesn't mean that we don't have, radical groups that are advocating for their position, and sometimes, you can disagree with like the strategies and tactics that they're using, but on campus things remain. Now, other universities, very different conversation, of course, and we can go through the cases here. We have been crystal clear since January. There'll be no boycott of Jewish businesses or businesses that have connection with Israel. There'll be no divestment of the endowment from investment vehicles or businesses related to Israel, because it's inconsistent with our values principal neutrality, and it's illegal under Tennessee law. We're not going to do it. What bothers me or what worries me is that in these deals that are being done, well, what exactly were people committing to, and based on what principles? I mean, what's the principle here, right? Is the principle, what's their position, their policy position, their principal position on the role of the endowment, or the role of boycotts, or the role of rule breaking? I mean, we had a case where it was utterly clear that clear fundamental rules of student conduct were violated, and then there were consequences for that. And then people can disagree, do you do this or that, or what's the right consequence? But we were 100% clear to say this is not the way we treat each other as members of this community, and you knew that, and if you didn't know, we told you, and you did it anyway. It was done, because you felt so strongly about it. Okay, but I cannot have members of my community being injured. No, we're not doing that. We're not breaking into buildings. We're not going to do this on campus. And if that's what you do, there are consequences for you. Crystal clear. The moment you got I think you lose your compass on that. Well, was it really bad enough, or was it not bad enough? And for this cause, but not the other cause, I think it becomes impossible. It becomes very, very difficult to lead a university. And my hope is, and I think we're seeing, when I'm optimistic, I'm seeing evidence now for universities to say, we're not clear. We haven't been clear. We have been muddled. And we have been muddled because of many, many years, because of pressure from one side or the other, and a cause we may be sympathetic or non-sympathetic, we're lost our way, or we never had principles like that. They were never clear. They were never clearly stated. And one thing you learn when you doing my time at the University of Chicago is those principles are clear. Those principles are clear, and the leadership, at least during the 4 years when I was part of, we were living by that, and we took the heat, and we took the heat many times. And so that's my question: what are your principles? Okay, what are your principles on that? And then are you enforcing them or not? And there's nothing wrong, I think, with universities say what, we've lost our way a little bit, let's go back. That's why even though I'm a little, I wish Harvard had gone further and had been a little bit, had acknowledged, the intellectual history of this more clearly. I love the fact that they're moving in this direction. That was an important step. And I just hope other universities would do the same thing. But this step, you're kind of losing your compass step by step by step. And then when you really have to have it, when you have to have clarity and principles, you don't have it. That's a real problem. And the last thing I say, for us, this is not some kind of new thing. So when you look at Vanderbilt's history, these principles were clearly stated. They weren't called that. Actually, some of them had exactly that name, by Alexander Hurt, which was our fifth chancellor, who stated them clearly in the late 60s, early 70s. And the concept of open forum, he always talks about that universities need to be a place where students need to be exposed to ideas so that they can hopefully have their own ideas. And that universities shouldn't take political positions. Very clear. So this has civility, the sense of civil discourse, very clear at Vanderbilt. So for us, this wasn't anything new. It was more like kind of reaffirming, making more visible, using language that people, kind of connect with. Well, that's what we did. But there wasn't. But the benefit of having decades of clarity, I think, really helped us in this case.
Thank you. I've got one more, and then we'll open it up if folks have. I think there's a couple of mics in the back, and we'll have runners, and it'll be a wild card. We'll see where the night takes us. But the question I have for you, Chancellor, right now is around diversity, equity, and inclusion. There are many in the Jewish world right now who are debating fervently whether or not DEI, as it's commonly known, is actually redeemable, or if in and of itself it is inherently anti-Semitic in the way that it is constructed and in the way it portrays Jews as white and thus powerful and thus oppressors in the binary. So the question I have is, how do you perceive DEI in general in this world as it relates to Jews? And how does DEI fit into principled neutrality? Or is that not the university, by having a DEI department, inherently saying we're picking a particular value?
Okay. Lots of things to say on that. So I think the most important thing is to go back to the fundamental values that we share as a community at Vanderbilt, right? And one, we want to make sure that the Vanderbilt education, right, for those students for whom Vanderbilt is a good fit and they're a good fit for Vanderbilt, have access to this education irrespective of their financial or any other aspects of their background. And our commitment to that is profound and deep, and our financial aid is among the very, very best in the country. I mean, I would almost say second to none. And we spend literally hundreds of millions of dollars every year to make it possible for students to attend Vanderbilt, irrespective of their financial income. That's a deep and profound commitment. So just to make, if your family makes less than $150,000, Vanderbilt is free. That's a pretty profound commitment, and we give financial aid, for families that make more as well. It's literally, I mean, we're spending almost $300 million every year. Now, so that's about access and about making it possible, making Vanderbilt a destination of choice for students from all sorts of different backgrounds. Commitment, value one. Value two, when you arrive on campus and when you're a member of our community, we want to make sure that you thrive, that you feel you fully belong, and that you can realize your full potential as a student. And we know that every student has the little thing where they need sometimes a little support. So I was a first-generation student, right? A big challenge for first-generation students is that campus life is complicated and you got nobody in your family to talk to. So having some support for that, whether that's a peer group or whether that's somebody in student affairs that can help you just navigate how to do this. When my kids have a question about their grad, when they had a question about it, and I say, hey, Dad, how do I do this with the major and the minor and do a double major? I had nobody to talk to about this. Nobody. I'm the first to graduate from high school in my family. Okay? So if you're an international student, you need a little bit of a primer on American life. What's that like? And what is an American classroom like compared to a classroom in Korea? And. So those to me are fundamental values that we all share, and that, I don't want to speak for you, but that at Vanderbilt are not controversial. When things get problematic is when those values that are fundamental to us get hijacked by a political ideology, okay? Then we have a problem. And to basically say, right, well, you come from this particular privileged class, and so we're not going to support you in your venture when you're at Vanderbilt. No, we're not doing that. Okay, so that is inconsistent with these values. So now the question is, now these terms become contested, and they become labels for a particular point of view, right? So the way we think about it is that when we think about EDI, or when we think about the, providing services to our students, whether you want to call it EDI or not, I don't really care. It's just that. It's providing access to people from different backgrounds so that their financial and their non-financial barriers are overcome so that they can join Vanderbilt. And then when they're there, I want to create an environment where they can thrive. That's what I want to do, the end. Okay, and that's a lot, by the way, that's hard work. I mean, it is not anything that's done because these things can be subtle, they can be complicated, and you got to learn what works and what doesn't work. Fine. We have no interest in supporting, a particular political ideology if it comes, if it comes under the moniker of this or that or the other. That's not what the university should be all about. So, inasmuch as we're committed to having this a place where we can provide access for many different backgrounds, diverse backgrounds, that's a core value for the university. No issue with principled neutrality. If people are trying to hijack anything that we do for political purpose, whether that is how we run our endowment or how we create an environment where our students can thrive, well, that we don't want. So that's the way I would think about it.
If anyone has a question for the Chancellor, just remember you are being live streamed for some
we have one. We have a hand up right there in the front, and then there's one there.
We are fans of questions that take the form of questions.
You don't want to be too close to that speaker. So, did you have the question? Yes. Oh, so just come this way a little bit so that this mic isn't too close to that speaker.
Very small question, but when you said,
Just
when you said that they tried to break into your office at Kirkland Hall, I was just curious, do you know what their intention was once they broke in?
We don't know. I mean, the goal was to occupy the office, and I don't know what their motives were, but that was the goal. That's completely unacceptable, of course, and. We're just like we were not willing to do that, and we don't know. There was never any stated motive of that, other than that this was a form of disruptive protest. That's what the students were talking about.
Hi, thank you, Chancellor. I agree with what you were sharing about the principles of neutrality and free speech, and I'm glad that you brought those with you from Chicago to Vanderbilt.
They were always our own. Okay, so then this is important to me because I think that people say because of my Chicago background, but this is something that attracted me to Vanderbilt. That there was a culture there, I think that was in line with my own values now. So I think what Chicago had. And where Chicago is a model there were these kind of reports and documents that talked about this very clearly. That's I think what's most useful there, but it's not the principle itself that was new to Vanderbilt. It's really like I think the way people talked about it, the labels people were using. So just want to be clear about that.
No, I appreciate that clarification. I was just going to say, I think people have noticed with some cynicism that many universities, not Vanderbilt, but many universities have embraced free speech and neutrality only after their Jewish communities have been targeted on campus. And so suddenly, with all the pro-Palestinian rhetoric, well, okay, we believe in free speech. But of course, if you wave a Confederate flag or something like that, you'd be expelled or whatever. And so my question is, do you think we should give the benefit of the doubt to these sort of latecomers to these principles or wait and see how it plays out? But I think there's I was just actually at our Harvard reunion last weekend, and they talked about the new principle, and everyone was kind of like rolling their eyes about it. So anyway, curious your thoughts on these latecomers.
Look, statements by themselves don't mean anything if people don't live by them, and you'll find out whether they live by them the next time there's a tricky situation. And it's good to be skeptical. I don't want you to be cynical, but I want you to be skeptical and to hold the universities that are now moving or coming around accountable, to live by those principles. I mean, that's the way I would think about it. I would say that many universities had a stated principle of free expression. Open forum, principle one. Very few lived by them. Very few lived by them. Okay, so I'll just give you just like a little anecdote from my life at Chicago. Okay, so this is like a typical thing, right? You kind of wake up in the morning and like, okay, that's going to be a fun day at the office. Okay, so one of the policies that was there is that any member of any recognized student group or any member of the faculty could invite any speaker they wanted. Okay, that is not true at most universities. Most universities will not have that. So I found out that one of my faculty members at the time, it was like years ago, obviously 6 years ago, had invited Steve Bannon on campus. Okay, never told us that he had the plan, and didn't have to, and it would be nice to know. But he was running a center and he wanted to have Steve Bannon on campus. And the reason we found out is because one of his staff members resigned in disgust and then leaked it to the press. That was the whole thing, okay? I got immediately a letter from, I want to say, almost 2,000 alums say that we absolutely have to disinvite Steve Bannon. And the argument was like, free speech is good, but not for people like him. And we said no. Steve Bannon wants to come on campus. That's great. But the way we're going to do it is we're going to do it, in line with our values. So we're going to have a debate. We have a discussion with him and another faculty member. And Austin Goldsby at the time volunteered to be his interlocutor. So then Bannon never came. He was in Europe, and this whole thing fizzled out. But you'll have to. When you get hundreds of faculty asking you not to do this, thousands of alums are asking not to. They will never give you a dime again. They call you names. You get the email things where you can't use your email because there are hundreds of things coming in. That's the moment when it matters, And irrespective whether you think Steve Bannon should be on campus or not, that's not the point. The point is that that's our policy, that's how we do it, and we think that this is an important value of the university and students and faculty to be exposed to these points of view. That's what it means to have an open forum. Because if you're not doing that, you're not having it. That's the tricky piece, okay? So on free speech, I think my worry is that most universities had the policy but didn't live by it. On principle neutrality, they didn't even have the policy. So, until like very recently, like literally 2 weeks ago, I think there were 4 universities that had a stated commitment to principle neutrality. Chicago, Vanderbilt, University of North Carolina, and I think the University of Wyoming. I may be wrong off 1 or 2. That's it. Everybody else, Princeton, Stanford, Yale, Northwestern, didn't have it because they wanted to be able, largely, to divest from political causes based on political or policy positions because they wanted to leave that option open. So now you have it. Now you don't have the policy. And you actually explicitly may have rejected that policy previously on a different issue. And of course, everybody pushes you and says like, well, you did it over private prisons. What about like what's happening in Gaza? Isn't that much worse? And now you're in the soup. Okay? And now everybody's pressuring. And now, the difference, of course, on this issue compared to others, as you correctly point out, there's 2 sides now. So you now find yourself in the middle, but you should have never thought about it, even when there was only one side. You know, that is a very, very problematic thing for universities to do, is to take a side in a contentious, contested policy debate. You shouldn't do it. I mean, that's what principal neutrality says. It's like, if you're, you know, if there is, and you shouldn't do it because you want to create a space where these issues can be debated. Okay? So this is really important, irrespective of your own beliefs. You know, you may think that privatized prisons are a horrible thing. But the question is, are people on the other side that have reasonable arguments and should be debated or not? That's the question. And if the answer is yes, then what are we doing?
I think we got it. One more at least.
Chancellor, thank you for being here tonight and for your comments. You made the comment earlier about faculty members ought to be free to have their own opinion and to speak out on what their opinions are from a political perspective. Are you concerned with the nationwide trends in the academy that faculty members across our universities in the United States are strongly identify as liberal, progressive versus conservative? In fact, it's not even close. So if, to the extent that we have that kind of overwhelming opinion on one side, are you concerned that despite the whole free speech issue, we're going to trend in that direction because that's where faculty members go?
Yeah, it's very important, especially when you think about, you know, particular certain areas, that there's conservative voices on campus, absolutely. And, you know, I think we're fortunate enough to, let's say, a law school. You know, we have some very prominent conservative voices on the law school there, and it's important to have them. If everybody has the same point of view, then we need diversity of opinion and we need diversity of viewpoints. The thing that is most worrisome to me is, I don't know who said it, you know, there was a question on that at some point, which was like, you know, was the question about what's most worrisome, I mean, if faculty are using their position, you know, they're basically viewing being a faculty member as an extension of being a political activist. So if that goes in the classroom or on the scholarship side, that's most worrisome to me. I'm much less worried about a faculty member that I'm not worried about that. If a faculty member teaches that class and they teach constitutional law and they do a great job, and students that can walk outside couldn't say from that where they're on one side and both sides got a fair hearing, or they take like that devil's advocate position on all of that, and then they're outside and they have like they're very clearly, and then the next day they go outside and they're supporting one side in the Supreme Court battle. No problem with that, as long as their scholarship and the educational side is clearly separated, delineated from their role when they're serving as an advocate. I don't have a problem with that. And I think we want that. We want faculty to be engaged. We want them to be reasonable. We want them to be, we want them to use arguments and reason and, and make the university proud. But I don't have a problem with that. I think if there's total intellectual homogeneity on campus, there's homogeneity, that's a problem. And the second problem is if people are utilizing their position to basically, if their faculty role is nothing else but an extension of their advocacy role, then we have a problem. That's the way I would think about it.
All right, I'm going to wrap us with a softball because I want to honor your time and everyone else's time too.
This better be a good softball.
It's a good
okay?
softball.
Okay,
you've
good.
Just,
yes.
you've just signed on for at least another 11 years in the role. what does the future hold for Vanderbilt? What are you most looking forward to?
Okay, well, that's very nice of you. So, look, I've had a phenomenal time here. I love the work that we have been doing. The people that work with me at Vanderbilt know we have that saying, we're proud but not satisfied. And that applies to this as well. So I think there are tremendous opportunities for us. The fact that I think we have had a clear orientation of who we are, what identity is, what our purpose is, what our values is, has served us very well. We have seen, a significant increase of students and also some faculty wanting to join Vanderbilt. So I think one thing that this whole thing has done for us is that, what we stand for is clearer and people know about it more. And we've had tremendous positive impact on that. And the second thing that I should say is that I'm very excited about Nashville. I'm excited about the vitality of the city and the community. We want to play an important role there. We want to be, universities are engines of innovation and economic development, and we already have been doing a lot of that, especially, if we think also about our partners with the medical center. But we want to do a lot more at that, and we want to be a great partner for the community, for the city. I could not be more optimistic about the city, the region, the state overall, and we're going to lean in on that. And we're gonna have all the resources that Vanderbilt has to offer, and they're substantial. We want to make sure that is in partnership with our community, with our city, and with the state. And I couldn't be more optimistic about that. I really think that this is we will have phenomenal years ahead of us.
Thank you. Well, a special thank you to Chancellor Diermier
Thank you.
from Vanderbilt
Thanks for
being
having me
here. Also, a couple other very quick words of gratitude to the Jewish Federation team that worked so hard behind the scenes for making this possible. A few of you are here tonight, Barbara, Deborah, and Jason, and everyone else in our back office. If you think the Chancellor had a really hard job this past semester, our campus professionals working with our Jewish students on campus, who we have here with us in the front. We have Rabbi Shlomo and Nechama Rothstein representing Chabad at Vanderbilt, and Shannon Small representing Hillel at Vanderbilt. Thank you all for being here for the important holy work that you all do, to the JCC for hosting us, to Darren in particular for helping to coordinate all the details for this evening, but also, I guess, still for you as well. We're grateful for you. Thank you, everybody, for coming, and have a wonderful evening.